My name is Rachel Hayes. I am 28 years old. As I was driving up to the house where I had spent my childhood, my palms were sliding on the steering wheel from sweat. I had not returned here for 5 years. And now I was once again standing at the familiar doorstep, with the colonel's insignia hidden in my bag. My family had always considered my military career a whim, something temporary, not worthy of attention. No one had any idea that tomorrow, at my father's company's big event, everything would change. I stopped the car by the curb and took a deep breath. The yard seemed smaller than in my memories. My mother's flower beds with pale roses were still stubbornly stretching toward the sun. I got out of the car and closed my eyes for a moment. Inside me, irritation fought with a strange longing. Entering the house, I felt as if time had stopped there. The same old photographs in the hallway, the same armchairs with worn armrests. Even the smell remained the same, a mixture of coffee and furniture polish. "Rachel, is that you?" My mother's voice called from the kitchen. She did not even come out to meet me. In her tone there was a faint disappointment, so familiar, as if it had long ago become a part of her. I walked through the house, sliding my fingers along the walls, as if checking whether it was real. My father, Charles Hayes, had worked for more than 30 years at the company Edgeline Defense, rising from a simple engineer to the head of a department. Everything in our family revolved around his career and the expectation that my brother Daniel would continue his path. "Your brother will be here soon," my mother noted when I entered the kitchen. Her eyes lit up with pride as she told me that Daniel had recently been promoted. Now he was managing projects. The pride in her voice sounded so natural, as if no other reason for joy existed for her. I nodded, hiding my weariness. Over the years I had learned to answer equally dryly. My mother kept talking about Daniel, about his wife Lisa, about their new house in the suburbs. She listed his achievements as if reading a praise-filled list. Not once did she ask about my life. I excused myself, saying I was tired, and went up to my old bedroom. There everything remained as it had been. Posters from college, trophies from sports competitions, photos from school parties. It seemed my parents had frozen time, leaving on the walls everything that was before my decision to join the military training program. Nothing reminded of my real path. Not a single photo from ceremonies, not a single newspaper clipping. Everything related to the Army had been erased. I sat down on the bed and ran my hand over the familiar blanket. In my memory appeared that evening when I first told my father that I had received a scholarship and chosen military service instead of business school. His face then changed, as if I had betrayed the family. He said, "The Army is for those who have no real options. You are too smart to go there." My brother had readily accepted their expectations, enjoyed the attention, and never missed a chance to emphasize that he would become the true pride of the family. I opened my suitcase and took out my neatly folded uniform. Tomorrow Edgeline would hold its annual conference, and my father had mentioned that even the company's chief executive officer, Caroline Murphy, would be there. He had spoken of it with reverence. He did not know that I had been appointed military coordinator for a $1,200,000,000 contract between the Army and Edgeline. A contract for which I was personally responsible. I looked at the Silver Eagle, the insignia of a colonel. At the age of 28, I had become one of the youngest women to achieve that rank in the field of cybersecurity. I hid the uniform in the closet, deciding that for now no one should know. Tonight I would endure another family dinner, where once again Daniel would be praised and I would be looked at with condescension. But tomorrow everything would be different. The doorbell rang. I heard voices downstairs. Daniel had arrived with Lisa, both radiating corporate success, as if it glowed from within them. At dinner the conversations revolved around his projects, about his ideas that the management already liked. My mother caught his every word, my father smiled with pride. No one asked me any questions. I sat silently at the table, lowering my eyes to my plate. When my father said that tomorrow a representative of the Army would arrive to discuss the contract, I barely managed not to smile. He believed it would be some major, perhaps a captain. None of them could even imagine that this representative was already sitting next to them at the table. I barely slept that night. I listened to the creaking of the floorboards, the hum of the old air conditioner, and thought about the coming day. In my hands I once again held my uniform jacket, my fingers sliding over the buttons and ribbons, each one reminding me of years of service, of the people I had known, and of those I had lost. In this house, none of that was spoken about. Here my medals meant nothing, unlike my brother's new car or his shiny position. By morning, I was already prepared. My hair neatly done, my uniform pressed. The mirror in my old bedroom reflected not a confused girl but a woman who had earned every rank. I put on my colonel's insignia and felt as if I was lining up for battle. This was not just a family occasion, this was a confrontation for the right to be heard. I left later than my parents. They had gone ahead, certain I was going about my own business. The drive to the headquarters of Edgeline Defense took only 15 minutes. The glass and steel building shone in the sun as if symbolizing power and control. The security at the entrance was strict, but as soon as they saw my identification and the silver eagle on my shoulders, their faces changed. "Good morning, Colonel," one of them said, saluting. I nodded and walked inside. In the elevator, I repeated the key points of the contract to speak as clearly as possible. When the doors opened, Daniel was standing before me. He held a tablet, reviewing notes. His gaze rose lazily, but when he saw me in uniform, his face stretched in shock. "Rachel, what does this mean?" His voice trembled. "Good morning, Dan," I replied coldly and professionally. "I am here for the project review." He did not have time to say anything before my father appeared from around the corner, animatedly talking with colleagues. Seeing me, he froze. His face shifted from surprise to clear unease. He was afraid of what those around might think. "Rachel, what is going on?" he asked in a lowered voice. "You will find out at the meeting," I answered and walked past. In the hallway, whispers began. Some employees stopped, staring in surprise at my insignia. The conference room gradually filled with executives. They greeted me with respect, introduced themselves, and I saw how their attitude toward my presence differed sharply from what I had always heard from my family. Daniel and my father sat together, tense and unsettled. Exactly at 9 o'clock, the Chief Executive Officer, Caroline Murphy, entered. Her step was confident, her voice firm. She scanned the room and then stopped on me. She smiled and walked directly toward me. "Colonel Hayes," she said warmly, extending her hand. "What an unexpected pleasure to see you here in person. I was expecting a video conference." "I decided to come," I replied calmly. "Family matters brought me to the city, and I thought this was a good opportunity." Caroline nodded and turned to the room. "For those who do not know, let me introduce Colonel Rachel Hayes. She is the Pentagon coordinator for Project Aegis. All key decisions go through her." The room fell silent. I noticed my father's eyes widen, and my brother's mouth opened as if he could not believe what he had just heard. They knew there would be an Army representative on the project, but they had no idea it would be me. The meeting began. The executives reported on the progress of the work, and every time questions arose about integration with military systems, all eyes turned to me. I answered clearly and confidently, explained details, made adjustments. All of this was happening in front of my family, who only yesterday had said the Army was a waste of time. When it was Daniel's turn, his voice shook. He spoke about his team and how he was implementing new solutions. I listened carefully, and then asked a few questions. His plan had gaps, and I pointed them out. Not to humiliate him, but because the project concerned national security. "These points need to be refined," I said firmly. "I expect revised specifications by the end of the week." I saw my father grow pale, realizing that his son was reporting to the daughter they had considered a failure for years. In Daniel's eyes there was something like anger, but he remained silent. By the end of the meeting it was clear to everyone. My presence here was not an accident and not someone's whim. This was my work, my position, my authority. I was not just a part of the project. I was the one on whom its success depended. After 3 hours of discussions, Caroline concluded. "Colonel Hayes will remain on site for another day to assess security. Everyone provide full cooperation." People rose and thanked me for my comments. Executives shook my hand. I saw my father shifting nearby, unsure how to approach, and my brother avoiding my eyes. My moment was only beginning. When the hall emptied, I noticed that my father was still standing nearby, clearly trying to gather his thoughts. Next to him was Daniel, his usually confident expression gone. Instead, I saw confusion and even a hint of fear. For the first time, he realized that now we were not just brother and sister, that I had power which directly concerned his future. Caroline approached me with a group of executives. She introduced me to those who had only seen my name in documents before. Senior Vice President Tom Bailey shook my hand and said that my work on countering quantum threats had revolutionized their approaches. I thanked him, keeping calm, though inside I felt the world around me shifting. The people my parents had placed on a pedestal were now looking at me with respect. And then came the moment I had both feared and awaited. Caroline turned to my father. "Of course, you must know Mr. Charles Hayes. He has been with us for more than 30 years, one of our most reliable managers." A pause filled the room as everyone noticed the shared surname. Caroline looked at us with curiosity. "Are you related?" My father hesitated. Then, pulling himself together, he said, "She is my daughter." His voice sounded unusual. For the first time there was a trace of respect in it. Caroline raised her eyebrows. "Charles, you never mentioned that your daughter is Colonel Hayes, the coordinator of our largest contract." My father lowered his eyes. I did not know about her current position," he muttered. I intervened, keeping my professional tone. Our family did not have many conversations about my career. Daniel stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Wait, you are that colonel? The one who approves all the decisions on the project?" "Yes," I confirmed firmly. At that moment everything became clear. The project he was so proud of depended on my decisions. For him, it was a blow. When the meeting finally ended, Caroline went off with the other executives, and my father beckoned me aside. His face was pale, but his voice already lacked its former authority. "We need to talk." We scheduled a meeting in his office in an hour. I agreed. At 11 o'clock I entered the office. Not only my father was there, but also my mother, whom he had managed to call, and Daniel. They were all waiting for me. My mother sat on the edge of a chair, her hands trembling. My brother stood by the window, arms crossed. My father nodded toward the chair opposite. "Sit down." "I prefer to stand," I answered calmly, clasping my hands behind my back. The silence lasted too long before my father spoke. "Why did you not tell us? For so many years we thought that I was wasting my potential?" I interrupted in an even voice. "That I would never achieve anything in the army? That I was hiding from the real world?" My mother lowered her eyes. "We did not know, Rachel. I invited you to every promotion ceremony," I said. "I sent articles when my work became public. But you never came." My father cleared his throat awkwardly. "Colonel is a very high rank. About the same as a vice president in your corporation," I clarified. He flinched at the comparison. "So did my brother. And now you have power over our contract?" Daniel asked sharply. "You came here on purpose to humiliate us?" I shook my head. "I came home. I have not been here for 5 years. The contract turned out to be a coincidence." My father sighed heavily. "But you could have warned us. You let us believe you remained some junior officer. And what would have changed?" I asked quietly. "When have you ever truly been interested in my career? Yesterday's dinner was only about Daniel's promotion and your niece's apartment." The words hung in the air, and for the first time they had no answer. My mother looked at me with unexpected softness. "We always wanted the best for you." "No," I shook my head. "You wanted what you thought was best. But my path turned out different, and there is nothing wrong with that." My father closed his eyes for a moment, then stood and came closer. He extended his hand, his voice trembling. "Colonel Hayes, Rachel, I must apologize. I was wrong." His formality felt awkward to me, but for the first time there was sincerity in it. I shook his hand. "Thank you, Dad." My mother added quietly, "We should have come to your ceremonies." It was almost an apology, and I accepted it. Daniel was still silent. Finally he said, "So now you outrank me." "This is not a competition," I replied. "But it always was," he said bitterly. "They always compared us." For the first time he admitted the truth. It was the beginning of something new. After the conversation in the office, silence fell between us, but this silence was no longer the same. It did not wound, but rather liberated. I understood that for the first time in many years my family had truly heard me. But there was still a path ahead. Old habits do not change in one day. In the evening, Caroline invited our family to join her for dinner. My father looked confused but agreed. We sat at a large table in the restaurant, and for the first time he introduced me to his colleagues as Colonel Hayes. In his voice I heard pride I had never heard before. It felt strange to me, as if someone had changed the script of my life right before my eyes. After dinner we went our separate ways, but in that moment I realized the door they had kept closed for so many years had finally been opened, and now much depended on whether they would be able to take a step forward. 6 months passed. I was already living in my apartment in Washington. A 2-room place with a view of the Potomac had become my refuge, where I could take off my uniform, turn off my phone, and feel at home. One weekend I invited my parents and my brother to my place. My father arrived first. He held in his hands a framed article about the launch of Project Aegis, where I stood in uniform next to General Grant and Caroline Murphy. "I thought you would want to hang this up here," he said awkwardly. There was timid pride in his voice. I thanked him sincerely, because I understood. For him this was a step toward me. My mother appeared with an apple pie. She knew it was my favorite taste from childhood. In her eyes there was embarrassment, but also a desire to make amends for past hurts. She no longer compared me to others. Now she listened more, asked questions, and though cautiously, she was still trying to understand. Daniel arrived last with his wife. He brought a bottle of wine and behaved more calmly than before. Sitting in the living room, he admitted, "You know, Rachel, we implemented those protocols you talked about. The team decided it was a brilliant solution." He smiled a little awkwardly. "At first I accepted the praise for myself, and then I admitted that it was your idea." I looked at him and felt that for the first time my brother was speaking to me not from above, but as an equal. My father examined my medals on the shelf and said, "I read about the cyber attack your group stopped. I did not understand everything, but it sounded serious." "It was," I confirmed. "We made it in time." He nodded, gazing thoughtfully out the window. "I always thought the army was about weapons, about the battlefield. I never saw that the real battle could be fought in the digital world." These words sounded like an admission that he was beginning to understand the value of my work. At that moment the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood General Eleanor Grant. I had invited her on purpose so that my family could meet the person who had believed in me all this time. She entered the living room, and my father stood, shaking her hand with respect. "General, it is an honor for us," he said. "We owe you much for recognizing her potential." Eleanor smiled. "The potential was always there, Mr. Hayes. I simply gave it the chance to be revealed." My mother invited her to the table, and the conversation flowed surprisingly easily. The general told stories about military life, avoiding classified details, but helping my parents see my world from another angle. I watched them and for the first time felt that the gap that had divided us was becoming smaller. At dinner my father raised his glass. "To Colonel Rachel Hayes," he said. "We may have realized it too late, but now we are prouder of you than we can express in words." I smiled and raised my glass. I knew their recognition would not change the past, would not erase years of pain. But it gave us a chance for a new future. And then I realized, true victory is not in proving them wrong. True victory is in living life the way I believed was right. The respect of my family was important, but not defining. I had become who I was meant to be, despite everything. I looked out the window at the lights of Washington and felt a peace I had not felt in many years. Perhaps the wounds would not heal right away. Perhaps we would still stumble. But now we had a chance. And that chance I value most of all.